Good evening, everyone. It is 7 p.m. and I am going to call this meeting to order. So if I could get the council members up here, that would be great. She's going to be leaving in about a half hour. Yeah. Okay. And then if you will all stand with me, we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So thank you, everyone, for joining us here in the chambers. Usually this is normally a work session, and we meet back in the fire training room. But because we have such special guests, and this is a topic that I know several people have requested, even staff up here, or board up here has requested it, so we are holding the meeting in the chamber. And I want to thank our special guests, which would be our legislators. Over there, Senator Wagoner, Representative Eslick, and Representative Sutherland. Thank you very much for coming tonight. We greatly appreciate it. Also with us is Al Aldridge and A.J. Dotzauer. Thank you very much. Yes. And they also will be giving an update. So a little different setting, a little different format, but I think it's going to be an interesting evening. So to begin with, I think we're going to talk about, let's start with our 2019 legislative session preview from the senator and the representatives. And if it's all right with you, we'll start with Keith. Is that okay? You're the first sitting there, so.
First in line.
You're the first in line. Thank you.
Hit me with it. How's the speaker going? Can people hear okay? Well, first of all, it's nice to be called a special guest instead of not you again. Thank you for that, Julia. And I know you've already introduced them, but my seatmates, Carolyn and Robert, I couldn't be happier to be up here. We did a similar thing this morning in Sultan, so hopefully we're warmed up for you. And I think it's okay if we allow some time for questions, but if you don't mind, I'll just kind of talk about what we see coming, and I have no crystal ball, so that's my first disclaimer tonight. Our party lost seats, so we're not in as great a position as I had hoped for, but actually in some ways that's just going to make us work harder for our constituents, and I think that we're the right people to do that. We ran on those things, and I can continue to look forward to the next session with a bit of positivity. The committees have not yet been defined, and I don't think I think it's the same in the House, right? So we don't really know what committees we are on right now. In fact, one committee that I was on, Economic Development and International Trade, no longer exists. So those functions will have to be spread out over other committees. So I'm hopeful that I'll stay on Ways and Means. I think that I have a very good chance of staying there. But as to other committee assignments, we really don't know yet. And this year's session will start on the 14th, although we have some training and some runs back and forth to Olympia. I'm mostly spending time in district, doing district things, helping constituents, going on tours, and learning about the district more. So I guess that's it for my introduction. I'll pass to my seatmate, Representative Eslick.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. So thank you very much for inviting us. This is a great opportunity to be in front of you again and to let you know that I'm very pleased to be representing you folks up here in Sedro-Woolley and up the valley, east of the valley here. We are definitely three great choices, I believe, for our rural districts. As I thought about this morning, coming to the Sultan one, we are representing small cities in the rural area like we have never been before, in my opinion, in the 39th district. We represent not only Sultan, a population of 5,000, and then Granite Falls, but Sedro-Woolley, which is one of the highlights of my districts, because really when you look at Sedro-Woolley, you are so lucky to have so many wonderful attributes for a great community. I had the chance, since I've been appointed, to come on several tours. One of them was for Janaki, of course, and thank goodness they are here for you and for the rest of the state, because they are on cutting-edge inventions, and the research they're doing there is incredible. But also, you have a great school district. I had the opportunity to make an appointment and go for a tour, and when I walked into the district office, they locked the door behind me and said, "Guess what? We're on lockdown." Said, "You did all this for me?" Well, that's awesome, but no, they didn't do it for me. It just happened that there was a shooter in the vicinity, and they were locking the doors. So I had the opportunity to really, and that was the main reason I had come up, to see the security system that you folks have up here. So that was great. Thank you very much. And then last year, of course, I was here with the tree lighting and driving through your little town and seeing how beautifully it's decorated. You must be very proud to be here. Last year, Keith and I had great success in bringing home the bacon, so to speak. We, Sedro-Woolley got some of their first money they ever had, right? They were, because they did not know to ask, and we always have to ask, and we know that now, and so I understand you've got some more asks coming up. Important that we bring it home for you folks. They said that, and I've heard this before, that newbies, they really want to make sure the newbies bring home projects. So this year it's going to be up to Representative Sutherland to bring home the projects. He doesn't really, we haven't had this conversation too much yet. But I've been working hard on mental health issues, transportation, and I am on capital budget. We don't have our committees yet, but I've asked to be on capital budget again, early learning again, and I have a couple of choices that I've asked for, but the third choice was transportation. Hopefully I get that, because it's really a passion of mine to make sure that we get rid of some of our gridlock and get more projects up here for you folks. So with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Representative Sutherland so you can get to know him, since he's brand new. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Carolyn. And I do have to mention, I didn't actually fire my weapon. They were just getting panicked at me being around, so that was a joke. Robert J. Sutherland, yeah, your school. When you have to explain your jokes, they're no good. Yeah, so my degree is in biochemistry from Gonzaga. I did cancer. I'm more of a scientist than a politician. Did cancer drug development and some DNA research. And and from my Air Force days way back, right out of high school, I've had the opportunity to live in large cities and small cities, across the world actually, Frankfurt, Zaragoza, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and I worked in Seattle as a biochemist. And there's a reason I live in Granite Falls, which is a tiny little town. I love small towns. I actually I don't live in Granite Falls. I'm about 3 or 4 miles south of it, at the base of Mount Pilchuck. And there's a reason I do that, because I love small towns. And even in Granite Falls, we're seeing traffic congestion building up. We have a stop sign, a four-way stop sign, 2, 3, 4 blocks traffic, because of the building that they're doing with the high density, the buildings that we see in the communities they're building, and nothing wrong with them. The problem I see is that they're not building the infrastructure to accommodate those. They're not building any more schools, hospitals, the road capacity, the lane capacity is the same. Everything's remaining the same except the populations in these small towns and the large cities. So on the campaign trail, transportation was probably, it was up there as far as, my priority, one of my priorities in the area, in the 39th, Highway 9, US 2, and the state routes and the smaller communities as well. I had the privilege of sitting in on the Transportation Committee yesterday or today, it was either Monday or Tuesday. As a new guy, I don't have a committee yet, so they allow me to float around, pick what committee I want to just sit in on and kind of learn something. And I sat in on transportation, and my strategy was, you're the new guy, you don't even have a committee, zip it, shut up, no one will know you're here, don't get in trouble. And I couldn't do it. A gentleman was up there speaking about, the problems in traffic and transportation and the funds, that they just don't have enough funds. They always say that. And how gas tax revenue was decreasing. And I had to just, hey, excuse me, is the gas tax revenue decreasing? Is it flatlined or is it increasing? The actual dollar amount. And I asked him straight away. And he stumbled around and I go, is it decreasing, flatlined, or increasing? Real dollars from last year. And he broke down, he says, it's increasing. They try to tell us they don't have the money, and they spend it on everything, freeway art, they'll spend it on everything but building that capacity we need. And then they want to come back and raise every tax imaginable and create some more when we have record revenues. We hit $50 billion in revenues. We are in surpluses right now. And it is unacceptable to me to even consider a new tax when we have record revenues and surpluses sitting there. They're falling all over themselves trying to figure out how to spend it. And yet on the campaign trail, every time I mentioned a bridge or improving traffic, how are you going to pay for that, Sutherland? That's how, with our surplus and with the money that you have. So I didn't mean, actually I'm talking too long, I apologize. Anyway, they got me fired up, and before I even got started, really, I'm going head-to-head with some people telling us we don't have enough money, and I reminded everyone we do. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to open it up to questions. I have a question to begin with. And first off, I'd like to know, what are the issues that you see are going to be the primary topics this coming session?
Okay, I'll start, and Carolyn hit on some of those things already, and we're well aware of them, I think. These aren't going to be answers that surprise you, but behavioral health, affordable housing, fixing the remaining parts of the Cleary that we didn't get right because we moved some, and I've said this before in other forums, that we moved a lot of big levers, and I think everybody knew there would have to be some tweaks. So I think we made good headway on education, but there's some things that are probably going to have to be, we're going to have to go back and fix things. I don't want to move big levers again, because then you don't have anything to measure the success or failure of what you've done. I had a bill on for housing to get multifamily units and to incentivize investors. Those types of things will still be my priorities going back. And then we have some very specific things in the northern part of our district. Carolyn's done this several times. I went on my first one today, the elk damage tour. It's a big problem for our farmers and people who live upriver. We still have issues on water. And then Robert was talking about transportation. So in the south part of the district, I pretty much ran on, I'm going to find a solution to 522, and instead of having it be out 15 years, pull that back in. It won't be tomorrow. That said, and I may be in a little bit of disagreement with Robert, but that's not going to be unusual. I think that we are going to have to find another source of money to fix transportation. So I'm hoping that Senator Hobbs, in his position as chair of transportation, will bring forward a transportation bill that we can swallow on our side, because there's a lot of things that need to be fixed. So those are the types of things that I'm hoping to work on. And it's not an all-inclusive list, but those are kind of the high points. And I'll quit talking.
So they're going to ask for more taxes. They're going to ask for capital gain. All the things things that we could put a lid on last year are going to come up again. Something's going to pass that we're not going to like. I know that. But the important thing that we do is to negotiate and work with everybody. I had the opportunity last week to go to orientation because I missed it last year because I was appointed, and it was the best thing I could have done because I sat in the room with 20 Republicans and 20 Democrats, and we all were friends, and that's what needs to happen. So that was 20 out of the 98 that I got to know personally. Great, great opportunity for me because we're going to have bills that we're going to need to work together on. So, we're going to make as much headway as we can, and it all has to happen first in the committees. That means we have to work together on them. Yeah.
And some of the, I just got an email, or was it Facebook? I forget. Something came across my computer today on the other side of the aisle. They're talking about gun rights. They want safe communities and things like that. So I read down, and it was obviously from a Democrat, who they have, not to be partisan here, but each side has their own specialties. And with 1639 in the courts and gun rights, it's a hot topic. They're coming after even more restrictions on our gun rights. So, and if anyone knows me, I'm a Second Amendment guy. NRA, I carry, and gun rights or property rights, gun rights are probably my top two issues. And so I found that to be rather offensive in reading that, and it's going to be interesting moving forward how we handle that with it being in the minority. But they're going to be able to pass a lot of stuff without a lot of our participation. So gun rights is going to be a big one for me. I-940, the police training and so on and so forth, that's going to be a huge one as well. There's a fix out there, and I've not read the fine print on anything, so I can't commit one way or another at this point. But that, I think, will be a big one, having to do with the liability and the training of our police and things like that. And again, for me, taxes. Carbon tax, income tax, tolls on the freeways and roads. We're already paying enough. I'm sorry, in my opinion. If they can demonstrate that's not true, I'm all ears. I'm a scientist. I'll listen to both sides of any argument. But I believe we're paying enough. And record revenue. We're running surpluses right now, and they're asking for a half a dozen or more new taxes. And I'll listen to any argument, but they have a tough sell with me as far as raising our taxes. So that's what I see coming down the pike.
All right, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is that okay? Mm-hmm. Any word on funding for a water park? Is that going to be in the in the works at all in the upcoming?
So Aaron may know as much about this as I do. I think we were down below the cutoff line for RCO projects, even if they get funded fully. So was that not the case?
Oh,
yeah.
yes, okay.
So try again.
Submit it again.
Anyone else?
I was wondering if you're aware at all. Wondering if you're aware at all of any additional funding coming through for drug treatment this coming year?
I believe there will be. Mental health and drug treatments are still top topic in Olympia, at least on the House side. But what we're really looking at is making sure that the programs that we've got in place are working. That's really important that we do that. So we did spend $155 million last year on mental health, and included in that, of course, is drug treatment and alcohol treatment. So.
And I'll just add to that, there is a lot of discussion in Olympia with mental health, drug addiction, and treatment and things like that, in the facilities needed to handle them instead of in jail, out on the street. There's a lot of discussion, and I think there's agreement on both sides that something needs to be done. We might not know exactly what that is yet, but I think that's something we can probably all work together on. We want our streets to be safe. And we want our children to be able to walk around with parents and not have to worry about some of the things that we see out there and needles and all that. So I think that's coming down the pike as well, and I'm hoping that's a bipartisan topic that we can come together and work together on and solve that problem, or at least make progress in solving that problem.
Work in progress.
Yes.
Thank you.
I had a couple of things. A couple of them. I serve on the Cascade Loop Association Board and will be in Sultan here next week for a meeting. But one of the things that has been a topic for us is the Federal Scenic Byways Bill, and we would love your support of that. I realize you're not federal, but you do have contact with these people, and so any support you can give us on that, we'd appreciate it, because the Cascade Loop encompasses all of our 39th district, and it goes over across the Cascades and then out of Whidbey Island and back again. So, and that's just one of our scenic byways in this state. The other thing is, you mentioned Highway 522. Is that, Keith, one of the ones that has also been mentioned as the most dangerous highway in America?
Well, I don't think it's one of the most dangerous ones because you can't get going fast enough to be dangerous. So it was, and just because you asked a question, so you know that I sat up here and 522 was the last thing on my mind, but now that my scope of responsibility has extended, I was sitting in Ways and Means one day, and Senator Palumbo, who's in the district where the restriction is, said, hey, we got to work together on 522. I'm like, what's that? So when we're supposed to be paying attention to testimony, I'll admit we were Google Earthing, and I went, oh my God, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. So it's 4 lanes on each end, comes across the river from Monroe, headed south into the Maltby area, and then it goes down to 2 roads for about 3 or 4 miles. And it's been that way for close to 2 decades now. What it is, it's just a classic failure of government and of people like me and us to work together to fix it. I mean, it's just the dumbest thing ever. It was partisan, and the roads were actually cleared. The right-of-way was actually cleared to build the widened lanes, and they've grown up with trees again. It's been that long, so it has to be done over. But what's happening there is kids aren't getting to school on time, and it's a quality of life issue. It's a safety issue because emergency vehicles just stop. There's no way around it. So even though it doesn't affect us up here, I think it translates really well when you see a failure like that of government that's, I won't call it an easy fix, it's a simple fix in terms of what has to be done. We have to find the money, and we have to finish that road.
And speaking of roads, that's a topic that keeps coming up to me, is are they going to work on infrastructure this year? Because many people are concerned about the state that the roads are in general. I mean, I don't know many highways that aren't full of potholes. And also, like you say, having corridor issues. And then there's also the problems with bridges. The Highway 9 bridge just north of Big Rock is the most ridiculous bridge in the world, but I guess it's still considered sound. I don't know. It scares me every time I go over it.
2 horses can pass easily on that bridge.
Well, that makes it all good. Okay. So I'll let it go at that for now.
And just to touch on 522 again, it goes from 4 lanes down to 2 as it's coming into Monroe. Once you get to Monroe, then you got 2 lanes and a bunch of traffic lights and a bunch of traffic. So the problem doesn't end with just that. You've also got to fix 2. It's part of the same system. And 2 goes off into Everett and then over the Cascades. It's a beautiful drive. That's the way I go to Spokane, and I'm a bike rider, motorcycle rider. That's the way I go. It's a beautiful road. I don't ride my bike anymore, my motorcycle. Well, it's been a while, let's put it that way. It's dangerous the way it is right now, to stop and go, and the people are frustrated. So you have to fix that whole corridor. And that's not going to happen overnight for sure. But they have got to start, we've already got the planning actually. it just hasn't been implemented. They need to start implementing some of these fixes over the years so that we can alleviate this traffic congestion that we're seeing building up. So it's not an easy fix, but it's very fixable.
So, Madam Mayor, I have some questions, but I didn't know what the format was going to be, if we're going to round robin again or if we get one shot at it.
We can round robin.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for coming up. And I've reached, I see Keith out on the coffee shops in town, so it's really easy to talk to him. And I've reached out to Representative Sutherland through text and looking forward to a cup of coffee and looking forward to get to know Representative Eslick better. And I'm so glad that we're talking about the things of homelessness and transportation and increasing housing. So there's an effort to surplus state properties or state buildings for housing. What would we be looking at in Sedro-Woolley if that were to happen?
You stumped me.
I'm not trying to stump. I'm just. Or is that something that you'd look forward to doing? Is there another plan when you say we're looking at addressing housing? What does that mean?
So the Housing Trust Fund is where the money would come from for that rehab. And last year they I think received $105 million for projects like that. This year they're coming back with a request of $200 million to do exactly what you're talking about: rehab old buildings and buy new buildings if they need to be, depending on where they are. A lot of them are in Seattle. That's just the facts, because that's where they have so many. But $200 million apparently was the number that was used several years ago. They were getting that much money, and so this would be just asking for the original amount again. That was in capital budget yesterday when they presented some reports to us. I was glad to hear that. It's absolutely has to happen. Homelessness is, I dealt with that 10 years ago when I was the beginning mayor, and the people that are left after we did intervention and housed folks, the people that are left are the mentally ill. And there's 3 of them, and I can give you their names, and I carry them in my heart every day. So what do we do about them? So I've been working very hard and researching, and found that in Seattle they've got programs already working very well for the mentally ill, and it does involve permanent supervision homes. So they're like assisted living. In Seattle, they're housing 3,000 people in 2 buildings with around-the-clock care. And they have to have, it's no different than, well, it is a little different. When Western and Northern were shut down in the 70s and we were supposed to go house them in our communities, and we never did that. This is what it is looking like now. So our little towns need homes, assisted living homes for the mentally ill. I had a conversation today with my new mayor in Sultan and 2 of his council members that I know very well, that I know have in the past said no tiny homes for the homeless in our city. We dealt with that 10 years ago. We're not going to set it up again for them to come back. Well, this is not the same. This is different. They have proven in these, in fact, we have a representative that is 16 years in directorship of these homes, and they are working. As long as you give the mentally ill a comfortable place with supervision, they are living there permanently, and they have been there for many years. So that's what I'm looking at, is helping our small rural cities set these up. So we'll see what happens this year.
And I had the privilege of attending a homelessness seminar, if you will, with all the top directors and people involved in the various programs for the homeless in Snohomish County. And this was about a year ago, I think. And listening to the various, I think there were half a dozen directors and people in charge of various programs. I think they were also from King County. And I was able to patchwork the data, the information that they were giving us. And if I recall correctly, Snohomish County taxpayers are paying $60 million a year for, the homeless and the programs that there are to help people. And one of the questions I think I asked, it was, well, how many people are we talking about? How many homeless are there in Snohomish County that we're taken care of? And I had no idea. I was there to learn. And I was stunned to learn that there was approximately 1,100, 1,200 homeless. That those programs, the various programs they had, were taken care of. And being the nerd that I am with science and math, I used to teach math and stats and things like that. I got my calculator out and did some quick math, and that's $59,000 a person. $59,000 a person. A mom, 2 kids, homeless. That's $180,000 a year taxpayers are paying for the homeless. And the problem's getting worse. We have a spending problem, not a revenue problem. There's plenty of money to do some serious good in helping these people. You could literally buy houses, put them in it, walk away, and that's cheaper than the continual spending of that kind of money year after year after year. So I like Carolyn's idea. I'm all ears. Anyone has a suggestion, I'm all ears, because I'm not an expert in how to solve homelessness and the problems that cause it. It's very diverse. Some people lose a job, some people get sick, some are mentally ill, some people want to be on the streets. And so each of those complex issues that cause homelessness has to be dealt with in a completely different way. Having one government program to deal with them in a uniform manner, one size never fits all, in my opinion. And so I would be very interested. I'm meeting with councilmen tomorrow morning, not on this topic, but as the days and weeks go by and months, I want to learn more about the programs that we have, and to see if we can do a better job at spending the money we're already spending with programs that are working. Maybe through our faith-based organizations and other organizations that deal with it. Maybe they're more efficient at helping the homeless or people that are near homeless than the government is. And so I'm all ears as far as solutions go with that topic.
Do you have a follow-up question to that?
Yeah. I just wanted to follow up on that. You touched on the near homeless, and I think that's an important part of this too, is there's a lot of families, and I heard a lot about this when I went to a Boys and Girls Club evening, and here was young people up there talking about what they had been living through, and their parents may have jobs, but they're working around the clock in order to keep them in a home, and at the same time that means the children are by themselves, they don't have any place to go, they don't have any supervision, and they don't have enough food to eat. These are things that, working poor is also a real issue for finding affordable housing. So it isn't just whether you're homeless or not and you need the government to provide you with the assistance to live there, but to find housing that you can afford to live in. I know that one of the projects we have going on here in Sedro-Woolley is a Habitat for Humanity's bill that our school district is working on. And they're working on that as part of their geometry and construction classes. So keeping those CTE programs going is a big thing for me, and to see us doing more to help people who really are working as hard as they can to make a living.
You pretty much described my growing up. I recall coming home, not having a refrigerator, no food, my aunt bringing a bag of groceries over. I grew up pretty poor in a nice neighborhood. You wouldn't know it. I went to school, dressed decent, but looking back, we were on the edge way back then. And there's various reasons for that, but we were. And so I know there might be people in your neighborhood down the road that they look fine, they look normal, and they're on the edge of not having a place to live, they may very well not have enough food to eat or medicine to take or whatever. They need to be, we need to find out who they are and make sure that we can do something as a society to help them. I think I haven't met a person yet that doesn't want to help people that are in need. People people that take advantage of the system, none of us like that. But there are people that fall on hard times, whether through a loss of employment, a medical issue, and they've been working or taking care of paying their taxes their whole life, and something happens to cause them to be on the edge. And maybe they're not homeless yet, but they might be right there. And we should be helping them as much as anyone else so that they don't go over the edge, and then all of a sudden we're paying the $180,000 a year because they are homeless. Maybe we can prevent that. Maybe there's programs that we can apply that can help them as well. So again, anyone that has ideas, the charities and the programs that are out there, I am all ears. I need to learn more about this. And if we can find the ones that work, then we need to put our resources into those and expand them. That's what we need to do, instead of constantly trying to recreate the wheel. So
I just kind of have a comment on that, and Jermaine just brought it up, and it's very true. So Community Action is a resource here in Skagit County that is trying to do really good things. Funding is a big issue. Just curious as to why organizations and agencies such as them are not more funded, especially with the need. They're not trying to reinvent the wheel. They're doing it, and they're doing it to the best of their ability, and also working with other agencies that are also working with the homeless or people who want education or jobs. So just curious, is that ever approached? Is that something that could be a possibility where there could be a coming together of both government and agencies that are working hard to do this?
We already do fund.
Yes, I know you do, but
Village Community Services is helped a lot for the last 30 years.
Well, I was going to say, to your point, Representative Sullivan, they also help prevent people from going over the edge, like people who just need help paying their heating bill just this month, just like short-term things like that would really make an impact. It's a small thing, but it'd make a huge impact.
I agree.
And I guess my question was, why couldn't there be more funding put in that direction towards those agencies that are doing it right?
They need to ask.
Yeah, it's not going to just happen. Those organizations, the nonprofits, the faith-based organizations, I don't have a magic wand and a solution, but they do need to ask. They need to come forward, and they need to put together a proposal. Maybe they can band together and work together to create a network. But they do have to come forward and ask and show why the need's there and what they're going to do with the funds. And I think funds are available. It's just not the easiest pathway to try to get yourself to them, access to them. So that's a challenge.
Second time around. So when we're talking about homeless folks, probably one of the first navigators they find to services is a law enforcement officer. And so that's one thing we're doing in Sedro-Woolley is hiring law enforcement officers. But we're finding that there's a jam with how many classes are being provided, the opportunity, the supply of classes. So my question is, do you think it would be something all three of you could back to expand Basic Law Enforcement Academy to about 19 classes, and also the Corrections Officer Academy up to about 7?
Yeah, so
that's a specific ask.
And this is not the first time I've heard it,
right.
Or the first place I've heard it. So it's a common theme across
right.
municipalities, that first, the cost of it, and second, just being able to get a slot,
right.
which costs you time and money. So I think that certainly I'm in agreement that we need to do a better job.
Thank you. And then following up on Representative Eslick's comment about the trust fund, the housing
trust fund?
Yeah, and we find in tight budget years that those dedicated funds get swept, is the code word, and put into the general fund. And that leads to my next point about refunding the Public Works Trust Fund. So what are your thoughts of doing that?
Yeah, we're talking about that again. So
okay, fantastic. And then finally, just the specific asks that you've heard throughout tonight, trying to get a more robust funding for our Main Street program here in Sedro-Woolley, for our Central Business District. We have great capacity and great folks who are volunteering and some their time to make that happen. And so whatever we can do to help support that. And then, Madam Mayor, are we going to be talking about the wastewater treatment plant?
We are.
Okay,
We are.
great. So I won't jump ahead on that.
Okay.
But the ask is, even if you're not on that committee and we need help for Sedro-Woolley, please help us there. Talk to your friends wherever you have them. Also in the caucus, if you hear it from leadership, we need someone to be our champion in the caucuses for the things that we need for our town. And we're looking forward to working with you on that and being those stakeholders. And I can make this personal offer that I'm happy to go down there and give testimony for that. And I know others up here have done so and had great experience with Al and his team last year in order to help us for the library and also for those mental health beds. First time in 28 years that Sedro-Woolley has received state funding, and so we're just eager to keep the momentum and also support that work for our town. So thank you so much for coming up. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome.
Julia, just in terms of how we run this tonight, because I know you have an agenda to get through and presentations, but I also know my seatmates have a long way to go home tonight. So if we could structure it in a way that allows them, if they choose, a way to go out. And of course, I'm home, so I'll stay here on the hot seat for as long as you want me.
Absolutely.
I'll sacrifice.
Senator, to get me up here, you said they had cots in the back for me?
We have a holding cell.
That's great.
Okay, yeah, so, and actually, we are going to be moving into our own, what's going to be our legislative agenda this year. So
So we want to stay and hear that.
you're welcome to do so, but you don't have to. If you want to get heading home, you absolutely can do that. So if there are no more questions, I am going to move on then to the second part of tonight's meeting, and that has to do with Sedro-Woolley's 2019 legislative priorities. And I would like to, I'm going to start with Al, if that's okay, but I would like to introduce Al Aldrich and his AJ, and first off I want to say, Al, thank you very much, because Al did work with us extensively last year. He's the one, well, I should say 2018, back in January and February. He's the one who actually was very much a part of helping us acquire the money, and then he worked with the legislators and worked with us. Al is brilliant in what he does, in that he makes us aware of what it is that the legislators are looking for, what are the questions that we should be asking, what is the information that they're looking for, and that is huge when you're going down and competing with all the other cities in the state of Washington also asking for money for their projects. So Al, we do thank you very much for the time that you have given and all that you're going to be doing for us, and we look forward to working with you, AJ. AJ is actually new. She's just come on board, as I understand it, with 360. Is that correct?
Close. She's returned to us.
No,
so.
returned to us. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the kind words. I am Al Aldrich. I'm a Senior Vice President at a Seattle-based firm called Strategies 360. The 2019 session will be my 24th session as a lobbyist in Olympia. Before I joined our firm almost 13 years ago, I was the first government affairs director at Snohomish PUD for 11 years. And at our firm, we do what's called contract lobbying. So we represent various clients by contract, as opposed to when I was at the PUD, I was an employee and I was the government affairs director for that organization. With your agreement, Mayor,
Yes.
The way we kind of set it up was I was going to have AJ give some overview for the session, and I was going to talk specifically about some of the priorities as I understand them for the city, and then we're both happy to answer questions about that.
It sounds good. Thank you.
Mayor and council members, thank you for having us. My name's AJ Dotzauer, and I've been with Strategies 360 5 years, and I had 3 sessions in Olympia before taking a leave of absence to go get my master's degree in politics and sociology. So this will be my first time working with you guys. I'm looking forward to helping you guys out this year. So I'm just going to give a broad overview. I know our state senator and our representatives have already covered some of this, so try and be brief. The 2019 legislative session will begin Monday, January 14th, and it's going to be a long session this year, 105 days. It's 105 days of regular session, and then there's always the chance of special sessions that can be called for 30-day periods. We're hoping to get out on time. So it is a budget writing year. During the long years, the odd long years, we have budget writing, and so that means we're going to pass a capital, transportation, and operating budgets. They are 2-year budgets, but they do need to balance over 4 years. As was mentioned, the Democrats maintain control of the House and Senate. The Democrats did pick up a few seats. But I think what's important to our work is that the bills or the asks that we have are going to be very bipartisan. When you have a transportation and capital budget ask, it's typically worked on both sides of the aisle. Just as kind of background, about 20% of the bills that are introduced in Olympia get passed, actually make it to the governor's office, and so that's a very small percentage when you look at how many bills are actually dropped each year. So, and we have found that most bills that are passed are really bipartisan. I think we hear about the really contentious issues that are having a hard time making its way through the process, but we have found that the bills that are passed represent a lot of hard work on both sides of the aisle and are bipartisan. And as has already been mentioned, the committee assignments have not been finalized. We'll know more next week, and so we're going to be watching that closely so that we know who to be talking to on capital budget and transportation committees. And I'll turn it back over to Al.
Thanks, AJ. But by way of a little bit of background for some of you who I haven't had the chance to work with as much, as I mentioned, this will be my 24th year, but in terms of Skagit County work, so I live in Snohomish County when I'm not in Olympia. I have a number of clients in Snohomish County. In terms of Skagit County, I first started working up here a few years ago when the Port of Skagit hired our firm and me to help with the transfer of the former Northern State Hospital property to the port. And you'd think it would be easy to get the state to turn over a pretty unused piece of property that was costing $1 million a year to maintain to an entity that is skilled at and eager to redevelop the property. And that's when I first kind of became aware Skagit County is a pretty high-functioning county in terms of various entities in the county and stuff. But it took us 2 years to get that done. Then last year we had to go back and do a little cleanup around funding for the second road access so that you could actually start the redevelopment process. But out of that, I got pretty excited about that whole plan to redevelop that and everything. And then the port also authorized me to help the North Sound Behavioral Health Organization, which is a 5-county organization centered in Mount Vernon, to help them get capital budget money to build new behavioral health facilities. And over the last couple of years, we've been able to get about $20 million for new facilities within their 5-county footprint, and we're going back this year to get money for a couple more facilities, working with Joe Valentine and some of his board people primarily on that. Let's see. And then last year, I was hired by the city directly to work on capital budget, particular capital budget item for the library, and we had some success with that. Enjoyed working with Senator Wagner and Representative Eslick on that item, and as was already noted, we had pretty good success, all things considered. So this year, we expect to focus on a couple of items. On the capital budget side, the main one I think we're going to focus on is trying to get money for a demonstration project for Cedron's VRD or VARCOR processor technology. This is the wastewater facility that I believe Councilman DeYoung mentioned earlier. We're probably looking in the range of, so the basic thought here is there's a lot of interest in that technology. There's a lot of benefits to that technology. The Cedron people tell us, and have told the legislators and others, that there's a lot of people, a lot of jurisdictions and other people who are pretty interested in it. They just don't want to be the first one. They want to see it work somewhere else for 2 years. So Aaron and the mayor and the council decided that they'd be willing to be a demonstration site if most of that cost was borne by the state. And I think there's a lot of benefits around the state. Stanley Janicki has shared with me a list of over 40 jurisdictions that have some level of interest in that technology once they see that it's a proven technology. And apparently that doesn't include just that very large dairy farm in Texas that they've already sold the technology to. That's okay. We've had good conversations with the Department of Ecology, and Mark and Aaron and others have been working on that. And so we're working a couple different angles to try to build support around that. It'll be about a $2 million ask, which is pretty healthy within capital budget standards. But as far as I can tell right today anyway, it's kind of an on-off switch. Sometimes you have a project that you can size down or size up or whatever, but this one seems to be more like an on-off switch. Either we get the $2 million or we don't. So that's going to be a significant effort, I think, on our part. On the transportation side, first, the good news is there's already been some early discussion about a new transportation package, particularly by Senator Hobbs, who will be the returning chair. He's from Lake Stevens, so he's the returning chair of the Senate Transportation Committee. Representative Jake Fye from Tacoma, I believe, will become the new House Transportation Chair next week. He's been a vice chair on that committee. Chairman Judy, blanking on last name, Cliburn, thank you, is retiring after many years in the legislature and will be sorely missed, but I think Representative Fye will be fine taking over that committee. So they're talking about a package perhaps in the 5-cent range to start with. Now, for context, the Connecting Washington package that was passed in the 2015 session was about 12 cents increase in the gas tax and amounted to about $16 billion worth of work over 16 years. That package was 3 or 4 years in the making. And then you have to go back to 2005 and 2003, I think it was, the previous times they passed a package. They have a transportation budget every year, but you can't do a lot of big stuff within that because a lot of it is O&M work, keeping the roads in good repair, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll see. We're going to have a healthy discussion to get things started. I've told other clients who have an interest in that package that based on history, and particularly including the most recent package, it's important to get in there early. The package didn't get much bigger after the first year, but it did get somewhat smaller as realities settled in on some things. So I think it's important to get these projects in. The project we're talking about is this Jones-John Liner Trail Road, which is an interesting project and has some interesting storylines to it. It's about $21 million is the current estimate that Mark's provided to us. That's a nice size to fit into a package. There was a lot of $20 to $50 million projects in the 2015 package. There were 2 anchor projects that were quite large, and then there was a whole bunch of 20 to 50-ish million, most of them projects. So this is a nice size in that regard. Aaron, Mark, and I talked earlier today. We're going to see if we can identify a beginning piece that could go into the 2-year transportation budget, maybe a couple $100,000 to get planning going or something like that. So we're actually going to do a 2-prong effort there, see what we can get done with the help of legislators and folks who are on those 2 committees. So that's kind of the focus on that one. And transportation projects, most of them you can phase or break into pieces, and that's actually helpful from a budgeting and funding perspective. The third big area is the Association of Washington City priorities that I believe was in your packet tonight. AJ and I are very familiar with that. We are among the 15 maybe contract lobbyists who represent cities around Washington State, and we meet once or twice a week with 4 or 5 people on the AWC staff. We've been doing that. I've been representing cities for 8 years at least, and AJ's been around, as she said, 3 years on that and meeting with those folks. And we go through the process on the staff side to prepare things that then goes to the AWC board and other elected officials for sort of fine-tuning and approval as their legislative priorities, and the final list I think you have in your package. So, we'll certainly be working on all of those. Top issues from the governor, just a little more context also. Clean energy, mental health, behavioral health, funding for rural broadband. I think every issue that was named by one of the legislators is also an important priority. But the governor's message has been pretty clear, and in fact, the governor's going to roll out policy things next week, starting on Monday. Monday is Clean Energy Day. I think Tuesday is Behavioral Health Day. I forget what Wednesday is. And then on Thursday, the budget's scheduled to be actually released. Some of the draft legislation won't be available by Thursday, we've been told, but will be coming shortly thereafter. Collectively, we have interest in all three of those top areas of the governor on behalf of clients, and I know you guys certainly care about mental health and behavioral health, and I think the port's going to care about rural broadband funding also, and we're probably talking in the range of, I heard 20 million and I heard 50 million from various people in either the governor's office or legislators who are going to be involved in that issue per biennium over several bienniums. It's at least a $200 million job to get a significant impact in the pretty rural areas of the state. Again, here you've got a joint project with the port and some other people that the Port of Skagit is seen as a leader among ports in extending broadband technology, and it's just part of that whole pretty high-functioning county that you all have here. Let me stop there, and we'll be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Paula?
Yeah. I have a couple of things, and this could be for over there or over here.
Sure.
But predictive scheduling is a concern for a lot of, Predictive scheduling is a concern for a lot of our employers, especially those who are small business owners. The idea is that if you don't schedule someone to work 2 weeks ahead of time, and then you have to call them in because somebody else called in sick, you now have to pay that other person overtime, and you probably have to pay the sick leave on the other person, and so this becomes a real issue for small businesses. So we would really, really like the legislature to take a better look at how that affects small businesses. Tourism. We want to see you continue the support of the Washington Tourism Alliance. And talked about, actually Carl talked about going down to Olympia to testify. One of the things that has come up often amongst business groups is the use of community colleges for testimony through electronic means, because for most of us, taking a whole day to go to Olympia to meet with you all, and not that we don't like you, we love you, but hey, we spend most of the day on the I-5 corridor. And if they're coming from Spokane or someone, it's even worse. And so what we'd like to do is see you be able to use a community college, go down and speak to through electronic means, and then you'd probably get a lot more public input. So
I think that's going to happen eventually. It's a hot topic, and we actually do have it easy compared to if you lived in Republic, and their issues are just as important as our issues, and just as important as someone who lives down the street in Olympia. So there's the technology to make it work, and probably some procedures that have to be worked on. But I think people are leaning that direction, and you'll see it eventually. Mayor, can I just elucidate on a point that I think Al kind of glossed over when he talked about the Northern State Swift Center and that transfer? 2 years like that was a long, long time to make something like that happen. What I don't know if everybody knows is this has never happened before in the state, to my knowledge. So that period of time you spent on it, really, it started counting from when it was closed 40 years ago. It took that long, and our team up here finally did it. So it's kind of earth-shattering accomplishment, and you kind of glossed over your role in that, but it was very important.
Well, you're right. It was an important activity to get done, and it's a great story to continue to tell as that continues to expand out. And of course, the wastewater technology from Sedron is pretty tightly connected to that and the growth of that, and then it gets back into the road project here. And there's a pretty exciting longer-term story to tell here about how all that's happening in Skagit County and in the Sedro-Woolley area in particular. It's exciting for me as a lobbyist to be involved in that, and having those couple of years of history makes it even more sort of personal and exciting for me. So thank you, Senator.
And Al, you might want to point out, I don't know if Representative-elect Sutherland is familiar enough with that Cedron Technologies, but it was also known formerly as Janicki Bioenergy. They just changed their name. So same outfit, funded originally by the Bill Gates Foundation to develop means of dealing with human waste in third world countries. So take a look at it.
Yeah, now they're taking the technology and sort of applied it to some other situations, municipal wastewater and some farming situations, as I briefly mentioned. Apparently their first sale was to an 80,000 head organic dairy farm in Texas, which I can't get my head around 80,000 cows in one place, but it's pretty exciting stuff, and they're still doing the third world stuff, which is very exciting also. But it's a great extension of the technology to more commonplace issues.
Right. And we did have opportunity. We had a great opportunity. We were invited up here by Peter at Sedron Company. We were able to go through, see the equipment, or actually the processor itself, which, as we understand it, has been changed to VARCOR processor. Instead of
apparently about rebranding now, so that's okay.
Right.
And while I'm just hearing about this, we speak about that technology being employed in third world countries, and people want to see it here for a period of time before they want to buy into it, but can't we view it in other countries?
There is one now in Dakar, and it is in operation now.
How long has it been in operation, do you know?
Almost 2 years.
Can we not use that as an operational success story?
Yeah, the one in Dakar is a little different application of the technology than would be used for like the demonstration project here in Sedro-Woolley, and you're very close to exhausting my technical knowledge on that at this point, Representative-elect, but there's plenty of people we can put you in touch with and arrange for a tour before you all go down to Olympia in mid-January.
Right. Yeah. So if there are no other questions for Al?
If I could, it won't take too long. Hey, Al, on the John Liner Trail Road corridor, $21 million. That's the best way to go about it, is the big lump, or break it down into smaller, how do you read the tea leaves on that?
Yeah, good question. So my sense now is to go for the two-pronged strategy. $21 million would never fit in a 2-year transportation budget. It's too big. So like I said, the good news is people who matter, the senator who's in charge of the Senate Transportation Committee and the incoming chair of the House Transportation Committee are actively saying we're going to start talking about a new package this session. We may not get it done this session, but we're going to start actively talking about it. So bingo, we're going to qualify with that size of a project. Separate from that, if we can identify a chunk that is doable within the annual or the biannual transportation budget, and I have some experience with that. I'm part of a small group of lobbyists who've been working on replacing the US 2 westbound trestle, which coincidentally enough is in Senator Hobbs's district and is on some kind of a watch list at WashDOT. We've done a couple of studies to answer the big questions about configuration and some other stuff, and so it's pretty close to being ready to go. Problem is, it's about $1 billion project, so it's probably going to be one of the anchors within a new package, and another presumed anchor, which is not quite as ready to go, but it's better than it was a few years ago, is a replacement for the I-5 bridge over the Columbia River at Vancouver. You couldn't do more than those two, and that's about more like $2 billion or higher, I think. You couldn't do more than that within a 5-cent package. 5 cent gets you about $7 billion, probably, ballpark. But that leaves a lot of room for $20 million, $30 million projects. And typically, just general politics tells you they're going to try to sprinkle those around the state to get more support for it, and there's a lot of need all around the state. When they did the $16 billion package it was approved in 2015, when they went out 3 years before that to find out the need, there was $80 billion worth of transportation projects that were deemed to be essential and appropriate to be funded. That's way too much to do, but just to give you a sense of what they did fund versus what you could rationally identify as funding needs, including some of the bridges and other infrastructure that is sitting out. There's a lot of old infrastructure. It's just the way it is. And revenues are up. That's a good thing for us. Population is also up, and wear and tear on the infrastructure.
All right. Well, thank you, Al.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. And AJ,
we're very excited to be back working with the city.
Oh my gosh, we're excited to have you working with us as well. Looking forward to what 2019 will bring.
Yeah.
So before we close, is there, Mark or Aaron, do you have anything else you want to add to this? Any comments you want to make? Okay.
Haven't heard from Doug either.
Doug? All right. So, sorry? No, I hadn't planned on doing public comment.
So I have a request, actually, because I know I'm familiar with the Jones-John Liner project, and I've been there and I know all about it, but my seatmates don't, and it's really, I appreciate the presentation, but it doesn't do an adequate job so that they can visualize what we're talking about. So if we could at least talk to that.
Mark, you're on.
I've given them.
I think it would be helpful.
That would be Mark.
Would you like me to do that? Certainly. So again, I'm Mark Freiberger, the Director of Public Works, and I passed out or put on your dais tonight our draft one-page project description, which we're developing in conjunction with Al and his firm for the effort with the legislative session. What this project basically consists of, and there's a few things involved in it. First of all, I should mention that the Sedro-Woolley Innovation for Tomorrow Center, the former Northern States facility, is a key background element to this project. We've actually been planning to do a project like this in our transportation plan for at least a decade or more. The Swift Center development speeds along the need for this project quite a little bit, and I think that's important to remember, and we'll be emphasizing that as we approach legislature and go through the process. Basically, SR 20 bisects Sedro-Woolley from west to east, and then SR 9 from north to south. Where they are co-joined, which is between just west of the Ferry Street intersection and then to Township Street, they are actually one and the same. They're the same route. In that section, traffic volumes increased from about 10,000 to 12,000 vehicles a day coming into the town from Burlington to the west to over 20,000 vehicles a day. And it gets pretty congested in there. When I came here 11 years ago, it was very congested at the AM peak hour and the PM peak hour, which roughly 8 o'clock, there was about a half an hour, 45 minutes, and then around 3:30 to 5:30. Over these last few years, and especially since the economy began healing up in 2011-12 in that area, now there's basically congestion all day long. And this is no different than any other town that is growing, is experiencing, and I know Monroe is obviously seeing the same type of issues down there, perhaps even more exaggerated in some senses, but this is intense enough for us that the transportation plan is seeking to mitigate that. There's basically two ways you can handle traffic growth on a state highway like this. You can add more lanes, or you can develop alternative ways for people to get around, mostly the local traffic. And what we're attempting to do with this project is add an alternative east-west corridor, which would take probably 5,000 to 6,000 vehicles a day off of the route, buy us 10 to 20 years of time on the route before we have to look at some kind of expansion on the SR 20 itself. which would be very difficult and very disruptive for our downtown, or for the area going through Sedro-Woolley in terms of real estate acquisition costs and additional traffic to try to get across at our major intersections. So back to the Swift Center, that environmental impacts study that was done as a part of that plan that was done that culminated in the state transferring the property to Sedro-Woolley identified additional traffic impacts from that growth at that center and the job creation and the trips that are generated that really moves forward the day that we have to come up with that plan of either adding lanes on SR20 or providing the alternatives. And so we've been moving this project along. We actually have funding in place now and a consultant hired who is doing what we're calling a scoping study to look at what it's going to take to do this in terms of environmental and right-of-way and engineering studies. This particular corridor, there are existing city arterials both east and west of the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad Sumas line. Your map there is a work in progress, so I apologize it's not as identified as it should be, but BNSF runs roughly in the middle of the map, north and south, and there's a 22-foot embankment that currently blocks those two roads from connecting one to another. So this project is designed to connect those two arterials with an underpass, which is the key and number one project on our list for this, and then upgrade those roads and add a new connector from Jones Road on the west side of your map via Trail Road down to Cook and then down to SR20. So again, it's a project, as Al mentioned, that is made up of many segments. You'll see on the back side of your map a more colored version of that shows the various projects that we envision that will make up this corridor project, and we're planning aggressively to move forward with these. As I mentioned, we've got a contractor hired, and we've been discussing this with BNSF for some time, and we have some positive indications from them that they'll work with us on this. They won't pay anything for it, of course, but if we can figure out how to fund it, they won't block us, and they will actually design the undercrossing, which they can do with their resources and their scheduling considerably less expensive and less impact-wise than we can do it. So that's an important partnership that we're working on with them. We've also been discussing this project with the Department of Transportation for years. They're very supportive of this as well. Of course, taking some volume off the highway, again, moves the day out when additional funds have to be spent on the route in that way, and so they're interested in partnering with us on this as well, and they'll be a critical partner for us on this. So anyway, a very important project. It is the highest priority project for Sedro-Woolley in terms of our transportation plan. We have been working towards this with other projects for a number of years now. We've done major improvements, most recently on Fruitdale Road, which is the route to the Swift Center. A portion of that road had been closed since 2013, and with Transportation Improvement Board funding, and maybe especially for Representative-elect Sutherland's benefit, Transportation Improvement Board is a really critical part of the local funding methodology that agencies such as ourselves have, and we would appreciate all of your continued support for that particular independent board, because it does come around periodically to roll that into DOT, which would be a disaster for the local agencies. I'll just say that up front. Because DOT has so many needs that if you give them any additional dollars, they'll use them first on the state routes. That's their mandate. And so it's very important to maintain that independent status for that, for the sake of your constituents. So that's basically a kind of a quick description of why this project and what the timeline is and all the rest of that. We'll be refining this and giving you something closer to the legislative session that will be a little bit more user-friendly, a little more well-labeled and stuff, and I'll be available at any time to talk this over if you have any particular questions when this thing heats up a little bit more. So thank you.
And Mark, did I understand in a briefing this afternoon with you that
the expected growth of new family wage jobs out at the Swift Center by Sedron and perhaps others of 500 to 1,000 new jobs in the next half dozen years is pretty closely tied to the ability to get either more lanes on 20 or get this alternative routing done. So there's a pretty close economic development, redevelopment tie to this request for transportation funding?
Yes, absolutely. So, and I've heard Peter Janicki mention a number of times those jobs figures. Most recently on one of the tours, he reiterated that again. And actually, the timeline is getting pretty close. We're hoping, especially with the related Sedron project, we're also approaching legislature about that would move that day forward even in more to where they build their first pod up at the Swift Center. And start producing those jobs. Now, we're, of course, very anxious to have those jobs, but they do bring with them, every job brings at least 2 vehicle trips a day in and out of the site, plus all the support services that go along with that. And again, the EIS identified those things. The environmental impact statement projected that kind of job growth, so they're pretty well on track with what they had projected. I believe the state made a good investment in Sedro-Woolley and transferring that property over to the port, and the partnership of the county and the city and the port moving forward with that. But yes, that job growth is directly linked to the need for this particular project.
Mark, thank you for that. And I guess it's coincidental, but just this morning, Representative Sutherland was talking about how he thought the use of overpasses and underpasses was so beneficial, and here's an example of it, within the same day. So.
And my example this morning was my parents. I have some relatives in Spokane, and if you've been in the Spokane Valley over the last 10, 20 years, I think they're doing a phenomenal job at moving traffic around. There's no traffic concerns there that I can see. When I lived there years ago, I went to Gonzaga. I graduated from Gonzaga over there. They were busy. Where you used to have a railroad track and a major road with a light, and the ramps come down, the train goes by, traffic stops. Well, they've gone underneath the railroad tracks. And I believe there's places where they've gone over it as well. So you can have overpasses or underpasses, and you remove the lights. Now, that costs a few dollars, but it relieves the traffic. And so I don't have a good idea what the exact cost is for doing something like that, but it sure does solve the problem. It keeps the traffic moving. You take the lights and the stop signs out and keep traffic moving. That's the whole problem. Highway 9 is a classic example. With all it goes from 2 lanes to 1 to 2, and then you have all the lights and things. If you can just keep the traffic moving, the traffic won't back up. And that's the main thing, is keeping people moving so they can get to work, get back home. The frustrations of sitting in traffic, let alone the carbon footprint of idling cars versus, cruising cars. It's a win-win. So overpasses, underpasses, I firmly believe in them. If Spokane Valleys can do it, and I've lived in other communities that do it, I think we should be looking at that more over here. I don't see as much of that over here.
And you've identified the key element of this project, as I mentioned, is that undercrossing. And a city the size of Sedro-Woolley would have probably pretty little chance of building one such as Spokane did. I'm familiar with that project, or an overpass. But this one is perfectly suited for the way we normally do things. We can basically go under the railroad with the existing embankment there. And so we think this is going to be an extremely cost-effective way of doing this, working with the railroad.
Okay, thank you. And so I'm going to bring this meeting to an end. I want to thank our representatives for coming up, for answering questions, it's great to see you face to face. I know you do good work for us. You do good work for the county. And we just thank you for taking the time to come up, for your time and energy. And I want to thank the council. Great questions. One of the things that we had put on here were the recommendations, other legislative asks, and I think you did a good job of putting that out there. And I want to thank Al and AJ for coming. Thank you very much. I know that was a drive as well, so appreciate very much your taking the time to come up here and for working with us so hard. We appreciate that. Thank you, Mark. You always do a great job. And with that, we are adjourned.